So you want to make a Spellblade in Master Mode in the new Oblivion Remake. How do you do that? You might be thinking, I'm just going to hit enemies with a sword and use some basic spells on them. And that is not going to work. You're going to need to know very specific information in order to actually kill things reliably on Master Mode. The first thing to know about Master Mode is that you deal way less damage and take way more damage. So when I attack things, I have a reduced damage modifier, but when my summons attack things or my followers attack things, they will deal and take normal damage. So one of the first things you need to know about using magic and dealing damage in Master Mode is summons will always deal more damage than you unless you make a crazy spell combo. So here's what the spell combo looks like. It requires 2 spells to weaken and then 1 spell to kill. Now let me show just using a damage spell in this Daedroth, because you're probably thinking I like lowered the difficulty or something, but the reality is not the case. Look at that. Look how little damage he takes without the weakness spells. So what are the spells that I used to deal so much damage? Weakness to magic on target 100%. 5 to 10 seconds is good. The longer the duration, the more it costs. And then I did weakness to fire 100% for 10 seconds. So this gets you an initial weakness to just general magic as well as weakness to fire. And then you hit the enemy with a second one. And then what happens is the first spell scales the second spell. And also weakness to magic and weakness to fire can actually bypass resistances. So weirdly, you can actually deal damage to things that are fire immune, for example, and instantly kill them, as long as you do weakness to fire and magic combo and then hit them with a fire spell. You'll actually bypass their resistances, which is pretty huge, because you might be thinking, oh, well, I can't kill certain enemies with certain elements, but fortunately that is not the case. If we just keep stacking weakness spells, you can just insta-kill things. Next, we have to talk races and birth signs. Both of these are going to drastically affect your ability to spam spells and to just kill things on Master Mode. I think the best race for general, like, magic is High Elf. You have 200 base Magicka, which is pretty crazy. You can also run the Apprentice for 100 more. Now, if you run the Apprentice, you're going to get weakness to magic, which does suck. But you can also run the Mage for just plus 50 magic. So right now you can see my base magic is 564, which is pretty crazy. Now, if I do get hit by a spell, I die, but I could obviously just run like resist magic effects if I wanted to and then just tank it. So that's always a thing you can do. So you can run the Apprentice and you can just get resist magic effects. The second best race for raw magicka is the Breton. Now, the nice thing about the Breton is that it is very tanky because it has a daily power that gives you 50% shield, and it also has a constant 50% magic resist, which is actually quite crazy. Enhanced magicka, so they have 150 base, and then they also have this resist magic. And if you combine the Breton's resist magic with the Lord Birthsign, you get 15% more resist magic, putting you at 65, and then you also get 15% shield. So if you want something that's a little bit more durable, that isn't going to die super quickly, Breton is definitely more tanky of Breton versus High Elf, but also consider for the High Elf, you can just use spells like enchantments that give shield and enchantments that give resist magic. So there's kind of 2 major ways to approach this. You can go the tank route, where you build up shield, you build up armor, you build up resist magic, and then you just tank, and then you also cast spells. Or you can go like the speed route, where armor isn't slowing you down, you're not really wearing armor as much, you're mostly wearing clothing, and you just hit things with high damage spells. Both of them can be good, it really depends on what your preference is. Also, for armor, we have to talk about spell effectiveness. So spell effectiveness is a direct multiplier on how much damage or how much health your spells heal for, or even how long your summons last for. So if you have 85% spell effectiveness, whatever the spell's effects are, multiply them by 0.85. So essentially, if you're wearing armor, your spells become weaker. So if you want to deal maximum damage, you do not want to wear armor. And that actually brings us to something very interesting about the item slots. So you can get your spell effectiveness up to 95%, with full armor if you max out like light armor or heavy armor. However, if you want 100% effectiveness, you should only wear clothing. And there is one item that you are always going to throw out, or you're always going to be tempted to throw out when you make a new character. The wrist irons are actually one of the best items in the game. I know that sounds stupid because it seems like they don't do anything, but Oblivion is weird. There are no gloves in Oblivion. There are gloves in Skyrim. I think there's gloves in Morrowind, but in Oblivion, people do not believe in covering their hands. So if you want to have clothing, not armor, that can be enchanted, keep your wrist irons. If you want to just run clothing and just run all these like Fortify Magicka enchantments or whatever enchantments you want to run, do not throw away your wrist irons. Weirdly, they are hard to find if you do get rid of them. Enchanting is one of the most important things for making these builds, because without it, you can't hit high magicka, you can't spam these spells, and you're going to have a harder time dealing damage. But the things that you can get are 2 ring slots, a shoe slot, pants slot, a torso slot, head slot, glove slot, and shield slot. Now, if you want to run armor, it's really up to you as to how much or what armor you want to run. I do recommend getting your armor level as high as possible so it doesn't reduce your spell effectiveness by as much. And also by running fewer pieces of armor, your spell effectiveness won't be hindered as much. So for example, if I unequip this shield, like if I go to magic, I'm 91% effectiveness right now. If I just unequip this shield, I'm at 94. And then obviously if I unequip the gloves, I'm at 100. So this build, I actually threw my prisoner irons away. So I do regret doing that because I could have been wearing these this entire time, but now I have to like kind of use some kind of form of gauntlets. But these are all the different slots that you can enchant. So right now you can see I have like these shoes that give me Fortify Magic, these pants, this necklace, this hood, this doublet. So you can go to like the clothing stores or you can just loot clothing. Make sure you don't run clothing that takes up 2 spaces. You want a pants clothing and a chest clothing. And the reason for that is you get 2 enchantments instead of 1. The next thing we have to talk about is Oblivion stones, like Oblivion Sigil stones versus Grand Soul Gems. So if I want to get the biggest effect for like Fortify Magicka, which is arguably one of the most important effects for a magic build, Grand Soul Gem can only get you 24 magic. There is no enchanting in Oblivion like as a skill. There aren't really potions or items that improve enchanting. So if you want to scale your enchantments, the best way to get magicka is to get to the end of an Oblivion gate at level, I think 24 or higher. And then when you grab, like before you grab the Sigil stone, save it, and then pick up the Sigil stone and then check it before you leave. And then keep reloading until you get a magicka plus 51. So if you want to get the highest magicka possible, you're going to have to close at least like 6 to 9 Oblivion gates. So I know what you're thinking. You're like, all right, well, that's all good in theory, but what about in practice? So here we are on Master Mode. I'm level 25. Here's an Oblivion gate. Let's test out that spell combo on an Atronach. Boom. He's dead. Now, the nice thing about it is stacking the 100% weakness just allows you to bypass things like Spell Absorb and all these other effects, so you will just kill as soon as you cast, which is kind of broken, but it is the way the game is. So if you want to do that, if you want to run this overpowered spell combo, definitely do that if you want to easily beat Master Mode. Now, you will have to get weakness to magic and weakness to fire, frost, or whatever element you want to use. I did experiments with doing like bigger effects. Like I made a spell that did 50 damage of each element, and then I ramped it with 2 different spells similar to what I'm like running right now. If you want to be efficient, just pick an element and just do weakness to magic, weakness to element for 10 seconds on both, and then hit him with the first one, switch to the second, hit him with the second one, switch to your damage spell, and then kill them. The actual damage spell that I'm using to kill here is a 100 damage, just simply 100 damage. Now, there's actually 2 ways to do this build. You can continue ramping the damage, like if I cast spell 1, switch to spell 2, cast spell 2, switch back to spell 1, cast spell 1. what you will do is you'll hit him with weakness to magic 100, weakness to flame, and then you'll ramp it, and then you'll ramp it again. But you have to switch spells in order for this to work. Another thing I have to talk about is mana ramping. Mana ramping can be kind of boring to do, but it's really stupid because it's really good. And essentially what you do is you cast buffs on yourself that ramp into each other and fortify your willpower well above 100 to spike up your mana regen while also giving yourself a ton of mana on reserve. So right now I cast one of the 3 spells, or one of the 4 spells really, and I'm at 717 magicka temporarily. But also consider that willpower recharges magicka by a percentage. So the higher your actual magicka, the more magicka recharged per second relative to your magic bar. So if I have 100 magicka, it'll recharge the same as if I had 700 max as well. So I'm just recharging more the higher my pool is, which is great for casting spells because then we can spam more spells. But the ramping, I start with this, Fortify Magicka 100 for 120 seconds, and then I do Fortify Intelligence and Willpower. This is like my initial spell, so that 35 willpower actually boosts my willpower over 100, and you can actually get your willpower to absurd heights. Like you can keep casting these spells and get it to like 400, and 400 willpower generates magicka really quickly in combat. So right now I'm going to cast Ramp 2. The important buffs for the subsequent spells are like the willpower increases. So now this adds Fortify Willpower 70, and these all stack. And I also scale my magic by another 100. So if I go back to my character, now I'm at 800 magicka. And then I'll switch to the final spell. And once we add the 3rd and 4th spell, you'll see that the regen is actually pretty insane. And these are very expensive spells to cast. I do have 100 restoration. All right, so now look at the regen. Now that I've cast the 3rd spell, and then if I cast the 4th spell, this final one, so I'm fortifying willpower by 100, and then I'm doing that again. And it costs me 600 magicka, but I can ramp to that. So right now my magicka is at 853. So then once we cast this final one, look at that regen. That's very fast magicka regeneration. And then if we look at our stats, 944 magicka, almost 1,000. Now, why does that matter? Well, now we can do everything for cheap. So I can spam my damage combo. I can spam summons. I can spam heals. I can keep spamming. And then if I wait, I get huge regen. And you can also maintain it. Like once you have it started, I can actually cast the first 2 parts of this combo. So this lasts for 120 seconds. So it's actually not that hard to maintain once it gets going. So as long as you just continually cast these, you will maintain ridiculous mana levels as well as really good magicka regen levels. All right, what about swords? What about the spell sword aspect of this? All right, so let's summon a Daedroth, and then let's put a buff on ourselves. And let's hit him with some debuffs. And let's do some sword things. Now right now, I'm using a basic enchanted sword that does pretty good damage, that leverages the exact same things we leverage on our spells. However, the advantage of the sword is it does not cost me magicka, but it does deplete through its enchantments. But in order to bypass this, what we want to do is when we have a spell that kills something, we want to throw Soul Trap on it. So for example, I have Soul Trap. It can even be for 1 second or like for however long the spell does damage for. And the idea is you do the Azura's Star quest, which gets you Azura's Star. It can store up to a grand soul. So anything you kill that isn't a human, because humans require a black soul gem, you can store a soul into this, and then you can use this to infinitely recharge. You can also throw Soul Trap on your sword itself, so that every time you're hitting something, you're soul trapping, and then you can refill your sword. But let's go over refilling it. So you can also have other things with a greater soul here, so I can use that to recharge this, and that'll keep me going. But as long as I'm soul trapping and I have Azura's Star, I can infinitely refill my sword. And in order to deal good damage with the sword, you want to put damage enchantments on it. So just do like straight up fire damage, frost damage, and just make sure you have weakness to magic and weakness to whatever element you want to deal damage with, and then cast the first one, the second one, and then maybe the first one again. Casting them like one after each other will get you pretty good damage. As you saw here, I was able to kill a Daedroth in a few swings of the sword. This is a damage over time effect. You can also make it burst damage. And also, if you want to be a spell bow, you can enchant a bow to do something similar. So like, let me show fighting that Daedroth without the debuff. I'm just gonna hit it. It's barely doing any damage to him. It's still dealing some damage, but if I add the debuffs, he can just melt. The final thing you really have to watch out for, and this is a painful one, is some enemies dispel themselves. So like if I go fight this mage and I start hitting him with spells, the final thing to watch out for is enemies using dispel on themselves or casting other buffs. So if we put debuffs on this guy and then hit him with an AoE, he actually used dispel in between casts and removed one of the debuffs. And that's important because it will prevent you from killing, or in some cases it'll actually completely neuter your damage. So you have to be mindful of that, and you'll have to recast the debuffs to then kill. Let's evaluate the signs that are good for this build. All right, so the mage is good because it is 50 magicka without any downside. The big downside of the apprentice is that you take double damage from magic, and this gets you one shot by any stray fireball for very long periods of time until you start stacking magic resist or spell absorb or something like that. So the mage is the safest thing. The Atronach is something you could consider. Instead of being afraid of getting hit by spells, you actually can tank them. You have 150 base magicka, which is actually pretty good, and you get 50% spell absorption, so you have a 50% chance of absorbing a spell. If you get your spell absorption to 100%, every single offensive spell that hits you will absorb. And also, you have to keep in mind that your magicka regen is halted, but you can always get around this by using the Ayleid Welkin Stones, which when you click on them or activate them in your inventory, restores your entire mana bar. So that's also pretty decent for running something like the Atronach. That's also good to know overall, because if you don't reset your magicka, you know, you're gonna be in a world of hurt. And then the Lord Stone is good for the resist magic and the shield. If you're running robes, you are going to be pretty vulnerable. You're going to have like no armor rating basically. Like if you're not running any armor at all, you will have no armor rating. So this gives you some armor rating, and also can stack resist magicka or resist magic with the Breton passive to get you at 65% resist magic, making you tanky. So if you want to go glass cannon, go apprentice. If you want a safe magic increase, go mage. If you want a more hybrid tank, huge improvements to magicka, go Atronach, but just know that you're going to be relying on other sources outside of absorbing magic to reset your magicka. And then if you want tanking, I would go the Lord. I don't really recommend like the attribute increases, like Thief or Warrior. The only one I might grab is Steed for like movement speed, but I would rather have the ability to spam more spells or to just straight up tank. Let's go over at least like 2 builds you can run for this situation. So we want to do a custom class, and you're gonna want magic. You could run combat to level like your combat stuff more quickly, but I recommend running magic because magic is going to be the bread and butter of this class, and combat stuff can always be leveled. You know, summon a skeleton, hit it with a sword, just do that indefinitely. However, leveling magic can be quite slow, at least in the original Oblivion, but we want magic. And then for attributes, I would say go intelligence, willpower, and these are also the attributes that you want to max out immediately. You're going to get most of your effectiveness from spells. So you want the willpower for the regen, you want the intelligence for the base magic. You want to max both of these out as soon as humanly possible, and then you want to also max out strength so that your per hit damage on physical is ramped a little bit. Maybe speed. If you don't really care about the physical damage and you just want to rely on enchantment damage, I would max out intelligence and willpower and then start maxing out speed. Endurance is nice for health, but this is something you should just be getting later. Strength can be nice, obviously. Agility, I would just completely skip. Unless you want to run like a dagger or a short sword, then start leveling agility after these are maxed out. But I would prioritize intelligence, willpower, speed, and then strength or agility, depending on what weapon you want. Now, daggers and short swords can be good because they attack faster. So if you want to get a bunch of quick hits in off of your, enchanted item, that's the best way to do it, because each hit applies the enchantment. And if the damage is coming from the enchantment and not the weapon itself, the base damage doesn't matter. You just want to deliver that damage faster. All right, then for skills, we definitely want Conjuration, Destruction, Restoration. Now you can run Mysticism if you want, and Alteration. These are totally fine. These are great. These I would say are more or less mandatory. Restoration, you could skip it if you want to heal through potions, but it's just nice to have. It's really convenient, and you can also throw like heal on your spells so that as you're casting, you get heals for cheap, and you just keep yourself topped off. Conjuration is really good for spamming. It levels Destruction because you can spam destruction spells on your summons and power level all three of these. Restoration, as long as you just spam spells on yourself, you can power level this. Same thing with Conjuration. So these can easily hit 100 from just like spamming spells, waiting, spamming spells, waiting, and it won't take you that long. It took me maybe 1 to 2 hours to get all of them to 100 doing this, which is pretty crazy. So do that. For stealth skills, you would only really want these for light armor. Now, Mercantile is nice to get yourself a head start for selling things, because all of the enchantments, all the custom spells, all the spells you need to buy, your build is going to be more expensive than other builds. And also, if you're running armor, you still have to repair it anyways. So like the real advantage here is you get insane damage. So this can be good to run. You can run light armor if you want to. You can also run heavy armor if you want to. Just know that it does slow you down based on the weight of it. And eventually, when you get master heavy armor, it doesn't weigh anything. Block can be decent. Block actually does reduce the damage a lot in this game. So if you block a single attack, it can allow you to tank. Athletics is good for move speed, so I do kind of recommend this. Especially if you want to run touch spells. Touch spells are higher risk, but they're cheaper. So like if you use touch spells, you kind of have to weave in and out of combat. So athletics is nice. So depending on if you want blade or blunt, or even archery, you can be delivering the enchantment through archery. It doesn't have to be through melee. So if you want to cast ranged weakness to magic and weakness to fire, and then hit them with a second one, and then start pounding them with damage, like fire damage bow, that's totally viable. Also, one of the huge things about bow is at rank 100 at master level, you get a 25% chance to paralyze every single shot. So you have a 1 in 4 chance to paralyze, which helps you crowd control and disables enemies. So bow is really good if you want to play it safe. Blade, the new changes to blade, I actually kind of don't recommend running it because blunt has some crazy effects that we kind of have to talk about. So blunt has, I think, a 25% chance to silence on hit, or maybe it's 20 from normal attacks. So as you're spamming attacks with blunts, you can silence. And then also when you do power attacks at rank 50, I think you get 15% shield, like a buff when you hit it with a power attack. And then at rank 100, you get a 30% shield effect. So if you want to tank and you want to have a chance to silence other mages, I would run like a mace. So I think that could be quite good. So I would run either mace. You could run blade. Blade does get a bleed effect. It's like 1 in 5 hits bleeds at rank 75, which gives you some extra damage. But if we're going to be doing damage ramp, we're going to be one-shotting, and blunt gets you this shield. So in terms of like objectively what's stronger, I think it's blunt. So we could run like blunts, and then if we want to do heavy armor, we could do that. For a build like this, I'd probably run armor as well. Now, the reason for this is we're going to be enchanting our armor quickly. So if you want to actually repair that armor, you need to have at least 25 armor. So this gets you your 25 armor. So this would be like a more tanky approach where you have heavy armor for tanking, you have armor to maintain it, athletics for speed, blunt to get you shield. Now you could also drop blunt for blade. I'm sorry. If you don't want the shield because you're getting tanking from heavy armor. Alternatively, if we wanted to run blunt, we could drop heavy armor and run light armor. And then also, if you don't even want to use armor at all, just drop the armor and then run something like mercantile. So that way you can buy and sell things for more early and then start power leveling your mercantile, because like I said, it's going to be an expensive thing to run. All the enchantments, all the custom spells, all that stuff costs money. So getting mercantile early can be good. There are other things too, like you can run acrobatics if you want to if you want to jump around a lot. You can always just power level this by jumping around a lot, so it's not really hard to level. Like as long as you're exploring, you could just be jumping at all times. Speechcraft is kind of useless. Sneak, not really that useful because you're casting spells. Security, you can power level your alteration to just open locked containers. The skill is just redundant. For other things, alteration is quite good, so you could run that as well. If you want to not even use like a physical weapon, you could just straight up use, you know, magic, like mysticism, alteration, just go full on mage. I would drop acrobatics here though, probably for mercantile, because you're gonna need that for cash. So this is just like a straight up mage build with like speed. And you can do that too, like you don't even really have to use the weapon skill. Like you can still have an enchanted sword, an enchanted bow, whatever, and as long as it has big enchantments on it and you whack an enemy, it's gonna deal huge damage. Now if you were to go to run combat, like let's say you want to make a more combat oriented one, I'll actually show that. So this would be to level, I actually don't recommend this, but you could try it. You want willpower, you want intelligence, it's kind of hard to get around that. Now this is not like a death sentence, you can still level strength for example, but you want that to be as high as possible. So if you wanted to be like more combat oriented, I would say you probably want like heavy armor, athletics, armor, and then like a form of physical damage. So maybe like drop mercantile and like blunt for like pure tanking. So if you just want to be like tanky, this would be the way to go. But that is it for this one. Definitely like and subscribe if you enjoyed this or found this useful. Also feel free to drop a comment as to what build you made for your Spellsword, and I'll see you guys next one. Peace.